Let's admit it, General Motors is just really, really bad at marketing. And this is frustrating because I think the enthusiast cars that they actually do produce are great. Be it the C8 Corvette that offers a near supercar experience at a fraction of the price, or the CT5V Blackwing with its big supercharged V8 engine and manual transmission, basically exemplifying what German car fans wish that the BMW M5 and E63 still were. Or just the fact that they have refined their pushrod V8 to be the most robust and economical performance engine of all time. Yet, despite all of this, there is still an incredible amount of missed opportunity, and I will boil this down to two main points. The first is their refusal to produce niche enthusiast models, and secondly, their inability to brand their products in a way that resonates. So we'll first dive in on GM's inability or just straight up refusal to produce niche enthusiast models regardless of how popular they would be. And I think the most glaring example of this is their lack of a competitor for the Jeep Wrangler and Ford Bronco. To focus in on the Wrangler, over the past 20 years, it has been an incredibly successful vehicle, selling somewhere between 150,000 and 200,000 units per year. And between the discontinuation of the Toyota FJ Cruiser for the US market in 2014, and prior to the launch of the Bronco, the Jeep was basically competing unopposed in this segment. And I think there are a few different things that make the Jeep Wrangler so successful, but first and foremost, I think there is a strong sense of nostalgia. Many people have core childhood memories of riding in a Jeep Wrangler, and even if you're not super into cars, it's pretty easy to tell that a Wrangler is a lot different than a traditional crossover SUV. Then, of course, there is the off-road capability. Now, I know most Jeep owners probably aren't taking their cars off-road all that often, but still having that capability there is a big selling point for a lot of people. There's also just a general sense of ruggedness that the Wrangler provides. There's not that many bells and whistles. The interior is very simple, very Spartan. And of course, there is the added benefit of being able to take the roof and the doors off with relative ease, which is of course another big selling point. So when Ford decided to bring back the Bronco for the 2021 model year, it really seemed like a no-brainer. The Bronco nameplate was super iconic, and enough time had passed since its infamous getaway.
Police believe that O.J. Simpson is in that car.
That it had become more of a meme than a legitimate branding concern. And once that bit of branding had been decided, the rest was pretty simple. Build a utilitarian, off-road capable SUV that you can take the roof and the doors off of and simply profit. And while the Bronco hasn't quite reached the sales success of the Wrangler yet, it still does move a lot of volume, something like 110,000 units per year. Now, something that we often hear from automakers is that building a sports car for them just simply isn't a good decision in terms of sales dollars. They sell in such low numbers that, generally speaking, the ROI just isn't there to develop a new platform or a new powertrain. But this enthusiast segment of retro-styled, off-road, Spartan SUVs has proven to be a very, very lucrative niche. Yet GM has indicated that they have no interest in competing in this segment, and I think that that is the biggest missed opportunity that I'm gonna talk about in this whole video. All of the ingredients are right there for GM. They have an iconic nameplate in the form of the Blazer that is just wasting away on an uninspiring crossover SUV. They are already primarily focused on the US market where fuel economy standards are a little bit more laxed, and this type of vehicle has already proven to be extremely successful. And this type of body-on-frame SUV would not be a radical departure from the types of vehicles that they're already producing, seeing as like they're the second biggest seller of light-duty pickup trucks. Yet when GM's president was pressed on this point blank, he stated they have no intention of entering into this segment. But he did provide a few reasons why. The first of which is that the Bronco and Wrangler are already on the market and GM doesn't want to have to play catch up. And my response to that is it's better late than never. And I also just don't think this is a very valid excuse. While generally speaking, I think reports of corporate espionage are a little bit overblown, I would almost guarantee you that GM was aware that Ford was working on the Bronco well before the general public. The other reason he provided is that producing a vehicle like this would hurt their overall corporate average fuel economy, which I also think is squarely the fault of just poor management of their lineup. And this more broadly will be one of the reoccurring themes as to why GM doesn't produce some of these enthusiast vehicles. So let's dig a little deeper. Now, generally speaking, the way that most car companies go about lowering their corporate average fuel economy is by producing hybrids and EVs. And it's fair to say that all of the American car companies, obviously outside of Tesla, were pretty slow to react on the EV front. But in the early 2010s, when EVs were just starting to become mainstream, it did seem like GM could potentially be a leader in this segment. They had a full electric vehicle in the form of the Spark EV, and a plug-in hybrid range extended EV in the form of the Volt. But when it became apparent that the predominant format for EVs was going to be the midsize crossover with the Tesla Model Y and the Ford Mustang Mach-E, GM was just slow to respond. They took several more years to enter in their competitor to this segment with the Chevy Blazer EV and the Cadillac Lyriq, neither of which seemed to be very competitive against those incumbents. And in the game of trying to lower your corporate average fuel economy, being a few years behind the trend for a massive automaker like GM is just an unacceptable mistake. Now, to pivot out of the EV segment, another massive miss by GM is their refusal to come out with a competitor to the Ram TRX and the Ford Raptor R. Similar to the Wrangler, the Raptor really dominated this segment for far longer than it should have. The original first generation Raptor came out for the 2011 model year and was basically the only vehicle in this segment until the Ram TRX came out in 2021, which subsequently led to Ford responding in the form of the Ford Raptor R. And quick sidebar, I have an entire video about how this high performance pickup truck segment got so out of control, so be sure to check that out. So what people really like about these trucks is that they're basically acting like halo cars, but for the pickup truck world. They combine a supercharged V8 with a highly capable off-road pickup truck to just produce a vehicle that is uniquely insane. And for the enthusiast among us that prefer pickup trucks to normal cars, these are the trucks that they have posters of on their wall. Yet, despite the vindicated success of the high-performance pickup truck segment, it's just an area that GM has refused to enter, which is frustrating because, again, all the ingredients are there. They are the second biggest producer of light-duty pickup trucks in the US, and they already produce a supercharged V8 that would be perfect in this type of vehicle. And additionally, they've already proved that they can be a little bit playful with this powertrain by putting it in the Escalade. So why not the Silverado? The closest that GM ever got was with the Silverado ZR2, which I have to admit, it is a cool truck and it would have been a great competitor to the original first generation Raptor. But in the year 2024, it's just not going to be a poster truck in the same way that the TRX or Raptor are. Now, GM's response to this would likely rely on the corporate average fuel economy, which we know is a result of their own mismanagement, but I'll say this. If you only had to choose one between the Escalade V and a supercharged high-performance version of the Silverado, you definitely should have gone with the pickup truck. That would have stirred up a lot more excitement around the brand than putting that engine in a big luxury SUV, regardless of how cool I think the Escalade V is. Now, the other avenue that I want to go down here is how when GM actually does come out with fun and exciting products, they just don't brand them in a way that resonates. And who I really want to contrast GM against is Stellantis, and specifically Dodge and how they have marketed the Hellcat. The Hellcat branding is likely the best of any automaker in the 21st century, and that is despite the fact that Dodge has a fraction of the resources available compared to General Motors. And the Challenger Hellcat product itself was a direct response to what Ford and GM were doing in the mid-2010s with the Camaro ZL1 and the Mustang GT500. Now, as a complete sports car package, the Challenger Hellcat is inferior to the Camaro ZL1, but because the horsepower starts with a 7 and it has this iconic branding, it was a massive success. And looking beyond the Hellcat, Dodge has been very good about branding their enthusiast vehicles in general. The Scat Pack versions of the Charger and Challenger were key anchors more towards the middle of their lineup, and when it came time to launch a Halo product, the Demon was again an excellent piece of branding. To take a quick look at Ford, they've also done an excellent job here as well. When they launched their new 5-liter V8 in 2010, they branded it as the Coyote, which is memorable and also helps differentiate it from prior engines. Then when they came out with a new 5.2-liter V8, they branded that engine as the Voodoo. And subsequently, when they then launched a supercharged version of that engine, they branded it as the Predator. Again, all of which helps people differentiate between your different engines and makes them memorable. Yet outside of just powertrains, Ford has done an excellent job at differentiating between some of the higher end versions of the Mustang by relying on some of the branding that was associated with Carroll Shelby with the GT500 and the GT350. But to pivot back to GM, they have really not embraced this type of branding. All of their different powertrains are some variation of alphabet soup, and it can be a little bit tricky to differentiate between the LS and the LT engines. Like, just for example, you have to have a pretty in-depth knowledge of GM to know that the LS1 and LS6 are very similar engines, while the LS7 is a much higher performance powertrain. And now with their new generation of Gemini engines, the LT6 and the LT7, it's just more of the same, and most people aren't going to be able to successfully differentiate those from the LT2. To switch over to talking about some of their actual cars, for the Cadillac brand, they're producing some very impressive performance cars with the CT4V and CT5V Blackwing. Yet to the general public, I just don't think that these cars really get the recognition that they should, partially because their names are another case of alphabet soup. And to circle back around to the Silverado ZR2 that we were talking about previously, it's just more of the same there. But one highlight is with the Corvette, where I do think they have done a really good job building up recognition around the Z06 and the ZR1. And the rumored Zora model that should be coming out in the next couple years, that seems like it could be another success. But with the Corvette, it is not all good news, because it also sounds like GM is going to try to spin off Corvette as its own sub-brand and potentially launch a few different EVs that are branded as Corvettes, which I think they could be shooting themselves in the foot. This did prove to be successful for Ford with the Mustang Mach-E, but it is a delicate setup, and I am just not sure that GM has the balance to pull this off. Now, I know I've just spent a lot of time bashing GM, but just to reiterate, I am, generally speaking, a pretty big fan of the enthusiast cars that they do come out with. But I just get frustrated with them because I feel like there is so much missed opportunity, first and foremost because they refuse to come out with these niche enthusiast models that have proven to be very successful. And when they do end up coming out with these cool enthusiast models, they just fail to brand them in a way that is memorable and a way that resonates with customers. On the bright side though, for GM, the hard work is done. They produce a good product. I think they just need to hone in on some of these specialty segments and just rethink how they brand their cars to enthusiasts.